Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thanks again for stopping by. I do appreciate it. I put up the link for the two MindSpeak sessions this year, Christine Lagarde and Dr. Titus Naikuni. I put up a little condensed link for an interview I did last year with Charles Ireland, who will be our next guest at MindSpeak. And also I put up the link for the interview with MG Vasanji that I did not too long ago. My home thoughts return to the view of Nairobi from the 8th floor 18 days ago. And you can see something across the sky, and I think it was sort of tuning in to the time when I was reading Thomas Pynchon. I'm currently finishing up The Comedians by Graham Greene, which I'd never read before. It's based around a story set in Haiti. And I must say I've enjoyed it, but I found The Comedians a bittersweet experience, a little like Fierce Naipaul's A Bend in the River. And in both books, the horror lurks just a whisker away. That goes to Heart of Darkness, the horror, and one of my favourite poems, The Hollow Men. Mr. Kurtz, he dead. Here we go round the prickly pear, prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom, between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response falls the shadow. Life is very long. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent falls the shadow. For thine is the kingdom. For thine is life, for thine is the life. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. And then from there I jogged some Conrad quotes from Heart of Darkness. But his soul was mad, being alone in the wilderness. It had looked within itself, and by heavens I tell you, it had gone mad. And another quote, we live as we dream alone. I quite like these two photographs I found. One was of a house at the Saint-Jean-Cap Ferrat on the Côte d'Azur, a contemporary villa situated in its own secluded and gated grounds. And I just like the infinity pool giving spectacular views over the bay. And then I also like this other house, the house under the palms in the Palmyra area of Marrakesh, is more a palace than a mansion, and indeed it looked as such. Ekaterina Soki-Ryanskia, the North Caucasus project director for the ICE International Crisis Group, said, and talking about Sochi, you need a committed jihadi and a bomb, which is quite cheap, and you can make it at home. It's difficult to deal with. And I thought to myself, that's the very essence of asymmetric risk, isn't it? And it really applies all over the world. According to ITU estimates, there will be 6.8 billion mobile cellular subscriptions by the end of 2013, almost as many as there are people on the planet. 2.7 billion will be using the internet worldwide, but that means that still 4.4 billion are online. Growth in mobile cellular penetration is flattening, reaching 96% by the end of 2013. Mobile broadband continues to grow strongly, on average by around 40% annually between 2010 and 2013. Cisco forecasts that global mobile data traffic will increase 13-fold between 2012 and 2017. And mobile data traffic will grow at a CAGR of 66% from 2012 to 2017. And I conclude with the fact that it's an information century. And then I came across this by John Pilger. We all live in an information age, or so we tell each other as we caress our smartphones like rosary beads, heads down, checking, monitoring, tweeting. We're wired, we're on message, and the dominant theme of the message is ourselves. Identity is the zeitgeist. A lifetime ago in Brave New World, Aldous Huxley predicted this as the ultimate means of social control, because it was voluntary, addictive, and shrouded in illusions of personal freedom. Perhaps the truth is that we live not in an information age, but a media age. Like the memory of Mandela, the media's wondrous technology has been hijacked. From the BBC to the CNN, the echo chamber is vast. Then he refers to Harold Pinter's speech when he got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2005, when he spoke about a manipulation of power worldwide, while masquerading as a force for universal good, a brilliant, even witty, highly successful act of hypnosis. But, said Pinter, it never happened. Nothing ever happened. Even while it was happening, it wasn't happening. It didn't matter. It was of no interest. The New York Times is reporting that President Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan has been engaged in secret contacts with the Taliban about reaching a peace agreement without the involvement of his American and Western allies. Secret contacts probably explain a string of actions by Mr. Karzai, saying that its US support for the war effort is declining. The President Karzai's spokesman acknowledged the secret contacts with the Taliban and said they were continuing. The last 2 months have been very positive, Mr. Faizi said. He characterized the contacts as among the most serious the presidential palace has had since the war began. These parties were encouraged by the President's stance on the bilateral security agreement and his speeches afterwards, he said. Put up a photograph of President Karzai, and I'm sure he's trying to sue for peace before Mullah Omar hangs him by the neck, as Najibullah was. Mullah Omar famously said many years ago, more than a decade ago, I'm considering 2 promises. One is the promise of Allah, the other of Bush. The promise of Allah is that my land is vast. The promise of Bush is that there is no place on earth where I can hide that he won't find me. We shall see which promise is fulfilled. Clearly, Karzai thinks Karzai is betting on Mullah Omar. Put up a photograph of Mullah Omar, a photograph of Najibullah when he was alive, and then a photograph of him and his brother hanged at the Ariana Square. I think that's what's focusing Karzai's mind. Jumping back, of course, one of my favorite books was written by Emperor Babur. It was a contemporary autobiography called The Baburnama, and it really is fantastic. And in that, he gives a description of the local flora and fauna in Afghanistan. The flying squirrel is found in these mountains, an animal larger than a bat, with a curtain like a bat's wings between its arms and legs. Tulips of many colours cover these foothills. I myself counted 32 or 33 different sorts. Bought some land at Istalif, north of Kabul. He loved the place. Few villages match Istalif, with vineyards and orchards on either side of its torrent, its waters cold and pure. And then returning to that book I read over the weekend, Monsoon by Robert Kaplan. On page just a few comments which I was interested in. Page 13, in other words, the Indian Ocean will be where global power dynamics will be revealed. Together with the contiguous Near East and Central Asia, it constitutes the new great game. In geopolitics, I agree with that. Page 100, talking about Narendra Modi, is not only the most dangerously charismatic politician in India today, he may be the only charismatic one. Indeed, I think Modi is going to win this thing hands down. And then I liked this quote, page 116, empires rise and fall, only their ideas remain, adapted to the needs of the people they once ruled. China's oil pipeline through Myanmar brings both energy and resentment, is an article in Business Week. Until recently, 80% of China's oil and gas imports were transported by ship through a narrow waterway separating Indonesia and Malaysia, known as the Strait of Malacca. That's the Malacca Dilemma. The possibility that hostile forces could one day block that crucial passageway and starve the country of energy has long made China's leaders nervous. And then talking about the fact they've laid down 500 miles of oil and gas pipeline from Myanmar's western coast to China's southwestern Yunnan province. And they reckon they can uplift over 440,000 barrels of oil a day overland to China. But of course, when those deals were struck, Myanmar was a client state of China. Now, of course, it had that rapprochement. And I'm sure one of the objectives of that rapprochement is to cut off the supply of oil via that pipeline. And this represents a breakout of the encirclement trade for China, pivot to Asia. And I expect a serious spike in the asymmetric threat to that pipeline. And on that note, I'll put up A Way Weighs the Snake, which for me represents the encirclement of China. Interesting report saying a third of Saudi internet users access Twitter each month, which is the largest proportion in the world, according to data from Peer, which is bad. And then I came across a fascinating interview by Adam Kurtz, an interview with Colonel Gaddafi in 1976 and 1977. And it really is worth a look. And I'd written about Gaddafi, his body in a freezer, what's the message, on the 24th of October 2011. And I said the raw feed of the capture and the death of the Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi and his son Motassim Gaddafi raised plenty of questions. The bodies are currently lying side by side, bloodied and half naked on a filthy mattress in a meat locker in Misrata. John Donne wrote, therefore send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And I'm left thinking this dead Gaddafi business is one powerful message. And today Marshall McLuhan's prediction in the Gutenberg Galaxy 1962 mind, that the new electronic interdependence recreates the world in the image of a global village has come to pass. The image of a bloodied Gaddafi, then of a dead Gaddafi in a meat locker, have flashed around the world via the mobile, YouTube and Twitter. Who's in charge of the messaging? Through the fog of real-time and raw footage, I note a very powerful message, the essence of that message being, don't F-U-C-K with us, because you will end up dead and a trophy souvenir in the fridge. The same person is probably repeating Muhammad's comment, I tell the coward crusaders I live in a place where you can't get me. I live in the hearts of millions. And asking, really, are you, or are you now very dead? And in the meat locker. Put up a photograph of Gaddafi, and then also there's another interview by Adam Curtis with Gaddafi, and it turns out he was driving a Peugeot 504, which of course is an iconic car when it comes to Africa. I like this photograph taken by Robert Capa. An iconic D-Day photograph depicts the bloody World War II front at Omar Beach. Currency markets euro 135.11, dollar index 81.12, yen 101.40, did touch 100.76 this week. Swiss franc 0.9039, the pound 163.30, Aussie 0.8890. Comments out of Stevens, the most prudent course is likely to be a period of stability in interest rates, and I think that's supporting the Aussie dollar now. Currency added 2% when he made those comments. Indian rupee 62.435, South Korean won 10.8060, Rial 240.93, Egyptian pound 696.22. The rand firmed up, appreciated 1.6%, got as high as 11.09. Last I checked, 11.13. The yen has really outperformed this year. It's up 5.5%, dollar 1.4%, euro down 0.5%. 21 out of 24 developing nation currencies rallied against the dollar yesterday. There was a pullback of the very violent move we've seen into the dollar and sell-off in emerging markets. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, 81.12 last. Euro dollar 135.11 last. I'll put up a 3-month chart, but it's fallen 7 out of 8 days. And Draghi is apparently considering ending the sterilization of crisis-era bond purchases, which would add liquidity to the system. So that would be quite a big move. Dollar yen, best performing currency this year. I'll put up a 3-month chart, up 5.5%. Gold, 1254.045. I'll put up a 1-year chart. I am not buying the bounce, I'm selling it. Crude oil at 97.63. I'll put up a 3-month chart, and I'm hoping to set up a triple-digit short. I like this dessert new style clepon, a kind of Balinese dumpling with beet yogurt and pumpkin seed oil powder. Looked very tasty indeed. Emerging markets, interesting comment made by Bill Gross. I call China the mystery meat of emerging market countries. He said during an interview, nobody knows what's there. There's a little bit of Bologna, so we're just going to have to wonder going forward through this year as to the potential problems in China and other emerging markets. Turkey's banks are having a bad time. The sector's 16-bank MSCI index fell by as much as 15% during the past month, hitting a price-to-book ratio of less than 1 for the first time in 5 years. The lira appreciated 2%. It's now down 4% for this year, but bear in mind they slapped on a huge, they increased rates by a dramatic 400-plus basis points. India's foreign minister is visiting Sudan on Tuesday, third largest economic partner for Sudan in the oil industry after China and Malaysia. Affiliated companies produce about 25% of the country's oil. Obviously worried about investments as well, and apparently they rescheduled some of the money that they are owed by Sudan. And just bear in mind that India's trade is expected to reach about $100 billion with Africa sooner than 2015. Malawi's former justice minister faces a merger charge in court. Business Week. Shooting of former budget director Paul Mafio in September sparked demands for a probe into allegations that as much as 30% of state funds were being embezzled, what local media dubbed Cashgate. President Joyce Banda fired her cabinet the next month, while donors, which provided 40% of the budget, froze as much as $120 million in aid. Kasembara was arrested last month on a separate charge of money laundering and was released on bail. He denies both charges. I feel this case holds the key to the truth behind what really happened for the country to lose such a huge sum of money, Billy Banda, executive director of the Blantyre-based rights group Malawi Watch, said in an interview. The former justice minister has named President Joyce Banda as his key witness. We want to know how involved the president was in this Cashgate saga. And I think that's really key, and I think she's deeply involved, I'm afraid. The South African All Share is down 3.83% in 2014. This is a 2014 low. Dollar versus Rand, I'll put up a 1-month chart. You'll see, I think we're going to trade 12 this year. Egyptian pound, quite firm at 6.96. The Egyptian stock market corrected a little bit, but it remains up 7.51% so far this year. The Nigerian All Share is down 0.63% so far this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 9.92% and at a record. This is the highest since the index was introduced in 2011. It's rallied for 15 straight days, which is the longest rally since March. Wrote about this when I said Africa remains in a sweet spot. I came across a horrendous photograph via Twitter, the killing fields of South Sudan, by a lady called Nicole Sobeki, who visited war where hundreds were slain. Then I like 2 photographs, one of a migrant fisherwoman from Mali pulling up pots from the Gambia River that I found on Photo Booth, and another one of a watchman relaxing on a floating jetty near the Gambian village of Bonto. Coming here to Kenya, into the International Court, is to decide the future of the Kenyan president today, well, of his case. Kenyatta's lawyers hope the case will be thrown out, putting an end to a trial that has driven a wedge between African countries and the court's Western backers. Kenyatta trial is crucial to the ICC. That's a fact. The trial had been due to start on Wednesday, but was postponed for a 4th time last month. when prosecutors said another witness had withdrawn and requested more time to gather evidence. In a January 31st court filing, prosecutors said a climate of fear had weakened their case against Kenyatta and said judges should rule that Kenya was in breach of its obligation to help the court's investigators. Several individuals with information relevant to the case refused to agree to be included on the prosecution's witness list due to fears that they or their family members would be targeted, prosecutors said. Then complaining about Kenyatta's statements at the AU in which he accused the court of being the toy of declining imperial powers, engaged in bias and race hunting. And I thought that language was particularly inappropriate, I thought, especially when you're trying to negotiate a concession at the same time. My conclusions are that witness attrition rates in a witness-based prosecution mean this case is all over bar the shouting. You don't request adjournments more than 5 years down the track if you have a compelling case. I wrote about this on March the 12th, 2013, when I said Africa's future is not seen in the rear-view mirror. And I said, I appreciate the outcome is being contested. That was the election, but it is being contested in the courts and not on the streets. I said that was a positive contagion. I said complexities remain around the process at the ICC. The incoming president has confirmed severally that he will cooperate with the ICC. He has to be taken at his word. Kenya remains the geopolitical pivot and the linchpin state in the East African community. Half of our stock market is held by UK-listed companies. Somalia would not have been stabilized or been its current new steady state without our help. I think Barack Obama's pivot to Asia detours through Africa, and that the US is seeking to roll back China in Africa. Therefore, I remain of the view that realpolitik, security and business interests will temper the current ideological position. I said then it does not make sense for our Western partners to lose us to the eager clutches of China and India. It does not make sense for us to lose our Western partners. We are better off being multipolar and multilateral in our relationships. The FT is saying EM taper tantrums, delaying Kenya's Eurobond issue. That's on Rich Wrap-Ups if you want to have a look. And I just said, it's a rare thing for all the ducks to stack up in a row, unless of course you are Paul Kagame's Rwanda, and you just happen to slot the Eurobond markets when the US 10-year is at a bubble low yield of 1.795%. And I said turmoil in emerging markets has put a safe haven bid into the US bond market and has rallied the US 10-year close to 40 basis points. Given that the US 10-year is the baseline, the Kenya government is gaining some small relief from that baseline improvement. And who is to predict whether this tantrum might well morph into something entirely more brutal later down the track this year. Therefore, I would err on the side of pricing with a degree of concession and pulling the trigger sooner rather than later. The frontier markets remain nascent in asset class. Demand for SSA sovereign paper is muscular. I wrote 2 pieces about this Eurobond on the 27th of January. I said mineral export license hold-up could hit planned Eurobond. We're still waiting to hear on that. And then, of course, November 2013, Kenya joins Africa's Eurobond League. 4 men have been charged in court for the airport bombing, which was what described initially as an exploding light bulb. But now it's basically they put some improvised explosive device in a trash can at Java House restaurant. Fortunately, no one was injured. International internet bandwidth per user increased substantially in 2012 in Kenya, and Kenya now has become the country with the largest amount of international bandwidth per internet user in the Africa region. It's a huge hike from 4,500 mbits in 2011 to 24,000 mbits in 2012. The government says they will not inject fresh capital into Kenya during the planned rights issue. This is comments made by Davis Chair. Kenya has been poor performer in the securities exchange, down 11.764% this year, following on from quite a sharp decline last year as well. Kenya shilling is at 86.348. The Nairobi All Share had a strong session yesterday and is now just down 0.1% for the year. The NSE 20 strong as well, and that's down 0.87% year to date. The NSE snapped out of a 6-session losing streak. The all-share rallied 1.43%. NSE 20 rallied 1.15%. The all-share rallied 5.795%, so a record through January 24th. Then over 6 sessions, had a swoon, slump 6.91%, and then we had yesterday's up trade. So we're hoping to see follow-on trade today. Kakuzi hit an all-time high. Bank counters seeing good volume ahead of the full year earnings parade, and the agricultural counters have been seriously outperforming, as have the insurance counters as well. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it.